My parents asked me to sell my $1.3 million car collection so my unemployed sister could move into a luxury apartment. Yes, you heard that right. A collection I spent years building, restoring, and cherishing. They wanted me to liquidate it like some rainy day fund for my sister's latest failure. Hello, everyone. Before we dive in, a quick reminder, if you enjoy stories like this, please subscribe. It's free, it helps the channel grow, and it keeps us motivated to bring you more unbelievable real-life dramas. Thanks so much for your support. Now, back to that night. We were in my parents' living room, the kind of suburban space that smelled faintly of pot roast and lemon cleaner. My mom crossed her arms, looked straight at me, and said with zero hesitation, "You should sell your car collection. Your sister needs a place to live, and we found the perfect luxury apartment." At first I laughed, I thought it was a joke. But my dad leaned forward, dead serious, and added, "It's an investment in family. You'll inherit it one day too, so what's the problem?" My chest tightened, heat rising up my neck. I stared at my mom, then at my sister, Melissa, who was scrolling on her phone like she was waiting for DoorDash. Not a flicker of shame on her face. She didn't even look up when my life's passion was put on the chopping block. I clenched my fists under the table. Outwardly, I forced a polite nod. Inwardly, my thoughts were racing. Did they really just say that? Did they really think I'd bankroll Melissa's dream life because she couldn't keep a job for more than 6 weeks? Here's what you need to know. My cars aren't toys. I've got a 2069 Camaro SS, a meticulously restored 2072 Corvette Stingray, a Shelby GT500, even a Tesla Roadster I bought before the hype. Each one has a story. Late nights in the garage, busted knuckles, paychecks poured into parts. They're pieces of me. And my parents wanted me to trade them for a 2-bedroom condo with marble countertops and skyline views? Melissa finally looked up, smirked, and said, "You've got 10 cars? You don't even drive all of them. It's not a big deal." Not a big deal. Those words rang in my ears like an insult. I felt my jaw tighten. My mom doubled down. "You're the responsible one. Family helps each other. She's struggling, and you have more than enough." There it was, the same line I'd heard my entire life. Family helps each other. Translation: I sacrifice, they benefit. I pay, they enjoy. I remembered the time I covered Dad's hospital deductible when he refused to go to urgent care. Or when Melissa's credit card debt mysteriously disappeared because I helped. Every time, I swallowed the bitterness, told myself it was fine. That's what family does. But this? Selling $1.3 million worth of history, sweat, and passion to buy her a luxury lifestyle? That was beyond comprehension. I could feel the room closing in. My dad leaned back like the decision had already been made. My mom raised her eyebrows, daring me to object. "Melissa?" She was already Googling apartments, humming like she'd just won the lottery. I forced a smile so tight, my teeth ached, and said calmly, "If my cars are just toys, then what you're asking me to do is nothing but theft." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. My mom's face flushed red. My dad's eyes narrowed. Melissa rolled her eyes like I was being dramatic. Inside, though, I was trembling. My pulse hammered in my ears. My hands itched to slam the table, to shout, to demand how they could devalue me so easily. But I didn't. I sat there, letting them stew in the weight of my words. What I didn't know in that moment was that this confrontation wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. And the fallout would rip apart more than just my car collection. After that night in the living room, when my parents asked me to sacrifice my car collection for Melissa's dream apartment, I couldn't sleep. The words circled in my head like vultures. You're the responsible one. Family helps each other. That phrase has been the script of my entire life. But help always meant I gave, and they took. Looking back, this wasn't the first time my family treated me like their personal safety net. It had been happening for years, death by 1,000 small requests, until I barely noticed the weight anymore. It started when I was in college. I was working 2 part-time jobs, waiting tables and detailing cars, just to keep my scholarships from running out. One Friday night, I got a call from Mom. Melissa had maxed out her credit card on clothes for a networking event. She was sobbing, saying her life would be over if she couldn't show up looking professional. Mom didn't even ask. She just said, "You'll cover it, right? You've always been good with money." I wired the $1,200. Melissa went to the event, dropped out of school the next semester, and never paid me back. Then came Dad's health scare. I was 26, fresh out of grad school, still paying off student loans, and trying to get my career off the ground. Dad refused to go to urgent care when his blood pressure spiked because he didn't want to deal with the bill. I drove him myself, paid the $3,000 deductible on the spot, and pretended it didn't sting. He thanked me once, but later joked at a barbecue that I was basically the family ATM. Everyone laughed. I laughed too, but inside it felt like sandpaper on my nerves. Melissa, of course, was the queen of requests. She lost job after job, usually blaming toxic workplaces or jealous managers. Every time she'd land on my doorstep crying about rent or car payments. I bought her a used Honda Civic once, just so she'd stop calling me stranded on the side of the highway. She drove it for 6 months, then traded it for a flashy lease she couldn't afford. Guess who ended up paying off the penalty fees when she defaulted? Me. And then there was the kitchen remodel. My parents wanted granite countertops and new cabinets. It'll raise the value of the house, Dad insisted. One day, you'll inherit it. Against my better judgment, I co-signed a loan with them. A year later, they refinanced the house again, not to pay me back, but to cover Melissa's failed business venture, a boutique clothing store that folded within months. The house still had peeling paint on the siding, but Melissa walked around bragging about being an entrepreneur. Every time I told myself it was the last time. Every time I swore I'd set boundaries. But then Mom would call with that quiet sigh in her voice. Dad would grumble about family loyalty, and Melissa would act like the world was ending. And I caved. Over and over. So, when they asked me to sell my cars, it wasn't just one outrageous request. It was the culmination of years of being bled dry. Each car in my garage represented a piece of myself I'd fought for. Late nights after brutal shifts, I'd roll up my sleeves and lose myself in the hum of an engine. That Camaro? I rebuilt it from the ground up the same year. Melissa skipped rent and moved back home. That Corvette? I saved for it by working 60-hour weeks while Mom and Dad went on cruises they couldn't afford. Those cars were more than metal. They were proof I could build something that was mine, untouchable. And yet, to them, they were just dollar signs. A collection to liquidate for Melissa's convenience. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Not the explosive kind of anger, but the cold, sharp kind that sits in your chest and refuses to leave. I realized something that night. My parents didn't see me as their child anymore. I was a resource, a reliable paycheck, a backup plan. I remembered one Thanksgiving, when I brought a girlfriend home for the first time. We were passing mashed potatoes when Dad joked, "Careful, don't marry him for love, marry him for his wallet." Everyone laughed, including Melissa. My girlfriend squeezed my hand under the table. She saw the flicker of pain in my eyes, even when I tried to smile. We broke up a few months later, and I can't help but wonder if that moment was part of the reason. Thinking about all this, I realized my parents had been grooming me for this role for years. The dependable one, the saver, the fixer. And Melissa? She got to be the golden child, the one who could stumble, fall, and somehow land on a cushion I paid for. That's why, when Mom stood there in the living room and told me to sell my cars, I didn't just hear a request. I heard every time I was overlooked, every time my sacrifices were brushed aside, every time Melissa was prioritized over me. And that's when it hit me. If I gave in this time, there would be no limit. Today, it was my cars. Tomorrow, it would be my house, my savings, my retirement. They drained me until there was nothing left. I looked at my parents that night and realized something I never wanted to admit. Family isn't always about love. Sometimes it's about control. And I was done playing my part in their script. What I did next would make sure they never asked me for a dime again. The next time we met, I already knew I wasn't going to cave. I had spent nights replaying every past slight, every time I had been treated like a wallet instead of a son. By the time my parents called for another family dinner, I wasn't walking into that house as their dependable safety net anymore. I was walking in ready for war. The house smelled of rosemary chicken and fresh bread. It almost felt like they thought dressing it up as a cozy meal would soften me. My dad was already in his recliner, flipping through channels like nothing was about to explode. My mom was bustling in the kitchen, humming. Melissa sat on the couch in yoga pants, scrolling through Zillow on her phone. I caught a glimpse of a listing penthouse, floor-to-ceiling windows, asking price close to $1 million. She smirked when she saw me. "Oh good, you're here. I found one with a rooftop pool. It's perfect. You'll love it." Her casual tone made my skin crawl. I sat down, deliberately calm, my hands folded in front of me. My mom brought out the chicken, set it on the table, and without even serving anyone, said, "So, have you decided which cars you're selling? The market is good right now. You could probably get more than 1.3 million if you move quickly." It was like she was asking me to pass the salt, not dismantle years of work and passion. I took a deep breath. "I'm not selling any of them." The room froze. Melissa looked up from her phone, her lips curling into disbelief. "What do you mean you're not selling? You don't need 10 cars." My dad's voice cut in, sharp and disappointed. "Don't be difficult. This is bigger than you. It's about family." That word again. Family. It tasted bitter in my mouth. I leaned forward, meeting each of their eyes in turn. Number. What this is about is Melissa wanting a luxury apartment without working for it. And the two of you thinking my sacrifices are somehow a requirement. I've been covering bills, debts, cars, credit cards, even your medical emergencies. I've bailed Melissa out more times than I can count. And now you want me to gut my garage, my life's work, so she can sit in a high-rise and brag to her friends? Absolutely not. Melissa scoffed. "You're being dramatic. It's just money. You'll make more. I need this apartment. Do you know how embarrassing it is to still live at home at my age?" I snapped my head toward her. "You think you're embarrassed? Try being the sibling who works 60-hour weeks so you can lease cars you can't afford. Try being the one who fixes dad's health bills while you're out buying designer handbags. You don't know the meaning of embarrassment, Melissa. You only know entitlement." Her face flushed. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under." "Pressure?" I let out a sharp laugh. "The only pressure you've ever known is choosing between the pool view or the city view. Meanwhile, I've been patching holes in your messes for a decade." My mom slammed her fork down. "Enough. You're crossing a line. This family has always helped each other." "Help?" My voice was steady, but my hands trembled under the table. "Help is mutual. What we have here isn't help, it's exploitation. You don't see me as a son. You see me as an ATM that doesn't charge fees." Dad's face darkened. "Watch your mouth." I stood up. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "No, you watch. Because I'm done. I'm not selling my cars. I'm not paying another bill. And I'm not letting Melissa move into an apartment on my dime. If she wants marble countertops and a rooftop pool, she can get a job and earn it like the rest of us." The silence that followed was suffocating. Melissa's mouth opened and closed, like a fish gasping for air. My mom's face turned pale, her hands shaking slightly. My dad gripped the edge of the table so hard his knuckles went white. I walked over to the side table, pulled out a folder I had brought with me, and placed it down. Inside were copies of every bank transfer, every receipt, every loan I'd covered for them over the years. Thousands upon thousands of dollars. I slid it toward them. "Take a look. That's what I've already given this family. More than enough to buy Melissa 10 apartments if she hadn't wasted it all. That ends today." Melissa pushed the folder away like it burned her. "You're cruel," she hissed. I shook my head. "No, Melissa, I'm finally being fair. For once, I'm choosing me." I picked up my jacket, slung it over my shoulder, and walked toward the door. Behind me, I heard my mom's voice crack. "If you walk out that door, don't come back." I paused, my hand on the doorknob. "Then I guess this is goodbye." And with that, I left. What I didn't realize yet was how far they would go to punish me for saying no. The drive home after that dinner felt unreal. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles hurt, but my mind was spinning faster than the tires on the freeway. I had finally said no. For the first time in years, I hadn't folded under pressure, hadn't opened my wallet to solve their problems. But instead of relief, I felt a heavy weight pressing down on my chest. Because I knew my parents and I knew this wasn't over. I didn't have to wait long. The next morning, there was a pounding on my apartment door. When I opened it, Mom and Dad were standing there. Melissa was behind them, sunglasses on, arms crossed like she was the victim of some great injustice. Dad didn't even say hello. He shoved the folder I had given them the night before into my chest. "What is this supposed to prove? That you're selfish? That you value some old cars more than your family?" I kept my voice calm. "That folder proves I've been more than generous. It proves I've carried this family financially for years, and it proves I'm done." Melissa's voice was sharp, like glass. "You humiliated me last night. Do you know how that felt? You made me look like a beggar." I turned to her. "Melissa, you didn't need my help to look like a beggar. You've been living off handouts for a decade." Her face twisted, but Mom jumped in before she could fire back. This isn't you, Mom pleaded. You've always been our rock. Don't let pride ruin this family. Pride? I almost laughed. You're asking me to destroy everything I've built so Melissa can play house in a penthouse. That's not pride. That's sanity. Dad's eyes narrowed. We raised you better than this. Family comes first. Something inside me snapped. No, Dad. Melissa has always come first. Every time. When I was in college, when I was drowning in debt, when I was sick, when I needed support, you weren't there. But when Melissa needed money, you made sure I gave it. That's not family. That's favoritism. The silence in my apartment was sharp and tense. For once, they didn't have a comeback. Melissa adjusted her sunglasses, muttered something under her breath, and stormed out. Mom and Dad followed, but not before Dad threw one last threat over his shoulder. You'll regret this. I stood in my doorway long after they left, heart hammering, wondering what regret meant. I found out a week later. It started small. My phone buzzed constantly with texts from relatives. Aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't heard from in years were suddenly sending messages. Why are you being so cold to your sister? Family should stick together. Your mom said you refused to help with something important. Melissa had spun the story. She told everyone I refused to help her get a modest apartment, leaving her homeless. She conveniently left out the part where the modest apartment had a rooftop pool and concierge service. Then came the social media posts. Pictures of Melissa sitting on her childhood bed, captioned, "Still stuck here because some people don't care about family." The comment section was filled with sympathy and judgment directed at me. My phone calls went unanswered. Friends of the family started canceling plans. Even colleagues at work gave me side glances, as if I was the villain in Melissa's sob story. My reputation was bleeding, all because I said no. One night, while I was polishing the Camaro in my garage, I caught the sound of footsteps outside. When I stepped out, I found the word selfish spray-painted across my garage door. Red paint, dripping down like blood. I knew immediately who was behind it. Maybe not Melissa herself. She'd never get paint on her nails, but someone she manipulated. Someone she convinced that I deserved punishment. I called the police, filed a report, but deep down I knew it wouldn't stop there. The next day, my bank called. Someone had tried to access my accounts using my personal information. Failed attempts, but close enough to shake me. Later, I learned Melissa had been asking around about my finances. She wanted details, leverage, anything she could use to force my hand. That was when I realized this wasn't just about money anymore. This was about control. My family wasn't going to stop until I either gave in or cut them out completely. I sat in my garage that night, surrounded by the hum of engines, the scent of motor oil, and the gleam of chrome. These cars had always been my escape, my safe space, and now they were the target. My parents wanted me to give them up. Melissa wanted me to sell them, and someone out there wanted to vandalize them. But I made a decision as clear as the shine on the Corvette's hood. If they wanted a war, they were going to get one. I wasn't just going to defend my cars, I was going to defend my life. And the way I chose to do it would leave my parents and Melissa stunned, and very, very sorry. After the spray paint incident and the attempted bank breach, I knew I couldn't just sit back and hope things would calm down. My family had declared war, and the only way to end it was to take control. For once, I wasn't going to play defense. I was going to hit back. I spent the next week gathering everything, every text, every receipt, every bank transfer, every favor. I organized the folder I'd shown my parents before into a meticulous timeline, complete with photos of the cars I'd restored alongside notes of how much money I had poured into helping them. I wasn't building a scrapbook. I was building evidence. When my parents called for another meeting, I agreed, but on my terms. We met at a neutral spot, a local diner with vinyl booths and the faint smell of coffee that never left the air. I chose the location because I wanted witnesses. No screaming in my apartment, no vandalism in my garage, just a public place where they couldn't twist the narrative behind closed doors. Melissa slid into the booth across from me, oversized sunglasses hiding her eyes. Mom sat beside her, lips pressed thin. Dad sat opposite, leaning back like a judge, ready to deliver a sentence. "So," Dad said, not bothering with small talk, "have you come to your senses?" I slid the thick binder across the table. "Number, but I brought something you should see." Mom opened it, her eyes scanning the pages. Wire transfers, loan statements, screenshots of Melissa's texts asking for money, copies of medical bills I had covered. My notes in the margins with dates, amounts, and outcomes. Melissa scoffed. What is this supposed to be? A pity party? No, I said evenly. It's the truth. For years, you've all leaned on me. No, you've drained me. And you've painted me as selfish the one time I said no. This binder proves otherwise. Dad leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. And what exactly are you going to do with it? Wave it in our faces? I met his gaze without flinching. Number, I'm going to share it. With every relative who's been harassing me. With every friend you lied to about me abandoning Melissa. With anyone who thinks I'm the villain in this story. They're going to see exactly who's been carrying this family. Mom's face went pale. You wouldn't dare. I already did, I said. Emails went out this morning. The color drained from Melissa's cheeks. She yanked off her sunglasses, eyes wide. You're ruining my reputation. I tilted my head. Funny, that's exactly what you tried to do to me. The diner around us buzzed with the clatter of dishes and low conversation, but at our table the air was electric. Melissa's breathing quickened, her voice rising. Do you have any idea how this makes me look? People are going to think I'm lazy, irresponsible. Melissa, I interrupted, my voice sharp enough to cut through her panic. People aren't going to think it. They're going to know it, because it's true. Mom reached across the table, her hand trembling. Please, don't do this. We can talk about it. Work something out. I pulled my hand back. You had years to work something out. All I ever asked for was fairness, respect, and you gave me none of it. So now, you get the truth. Dad's jaw tightened, his voice low and threatening. You've made a mistake. Family doesn't betray family. I leaned in, my voice steady. No, Dad. Family doesn't exploit family. There's a difference. For the first time, none of them had anything to say. Melissa's mouth opened, then shut. Mom's eyes darted away, glassy with tears she didn't let fall. Dad's fists clenched, but he stayed silent. I stood up, tossing a few bills on the table for my coffee. I'm done. Don't call me for money again. Don't show up at my door. And if you keep trying to sabotage me, I have more than enough proof to take this beyond family gossip. Don't test me. The walk out of that diner felt surreal, like shedding a heavy coat I'd been wearing my whole life. For the first time, I wasn't looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next demand. I was free, or at least, I thought I was. Because while I had ended their ability to manipulate me with lies, I underestimated just how desperate Melissa could become when her comfort was threatened. And her walking out of that diner, binders still in my bag, I felt lighter than I had in years. For once, I had turned the tables. I wasn't the silent provider anymore. I had proof. I had boundaries. And I had finally said what needed to be said. But if I thought Melissa would accept defeat quietly, I was wrong. 2 weeks later, I came home from work to find a notice taped to my apartment door. It was from the building's management. Someone had filed an anonymous complaint claiming I was running an illegal car business out of my garage. They said I was storing vehicles for profit, disturbing neighbors with late-night noise, and violating zoning laws. I laughed when I first read it, because it was so ridiculous. My garage was spotless, and my neighbors loved my cars. But then I realized, this wasn't random. This had Melissa's fingerprints all over it. She couldn't take my cars, so she tried to weaponize them against me. I called the management office, cleared it up, and even had a neighbor vouch for me. The complaint was dismissed, but it was the final nail in the coffin. Melissa wasn't just entitled, she was vengeful. That night, I sat in my garage, surrounded by the cars that had become more than machines. They were my history, my therapy, my joy. As I ran my hand along the hood of the Camaro, I thought about every sacrifice I'd made, every check written, every favor granted, every time I let them drain me dry, because I thought it was my duty. And then I thought about the look on my mom's face at the diner, pale and shaken, the silence from my dad, the panic in Melissa's eyes. For once, they had to face the reality that I wasn't theirs to control anymore. I realized something important. Boundaries don't make you a bad son or a bad brother. Boundaries make you a human being who refuses to be used. I had spent years confusing sacrifice with love. But love doesn't demand you empty yourself to fill someone else's bottomless pit. So I made a choice. I cut contact, not out of anger, but out of self-preservation. I blocked Melissa's number, told my parents I needed distance, and stopped answering the relatives who parroted her sob stories. It wasn't easy. There were nights I stared at my phone, tempted to check in, tempted to apologize, just to make the silence go away. But then I'd walk into my garage, see the gleam of chrome, smell the familiar scent of oil and leather, and remember why I had drawn the line. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, the noise died down. The texts from relatives stopped. Melissa moved out of my parents' house eventually. Not into a penthouse, but into a small apartment she could actually afford. My parents never admitted I was right, but they stopped asking for money. And me? I finally started living for myself. One evening, I hosted a barbecue in my backyard. Just a few close friends, burgers on the grill, music playing low. Someone asked me about the cars, why I loved them so much. I smiled, ran my hand along the Corvette, and said, "Because they remind me that you can build something beautiful with your own two hands, and no one can take that away unless you let them." It hit me then. That was the lesson. People will take as much as you allow. If you never say no, they'll never stop asking. But the moment you stand firm, the moment you value yourself enough to refuse, that's when you reclaim your life. I don't know if my parents ever truly realized what they lost when they tried to push me too far. I don't know if Melissa regrets how far she went, or if she just blames me like she always has. What I do know is this: they'll never get another dime, another favor, or another piece of me that I don't freely give. And that's freedom. If you've ever been in a situation where people mistake your kindness for weakness, let my story be your reminder. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to protect what you've built. And sometimes the strongest love you can show yourself is drawing a line and not letting anyone cross it. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If it resonated with you, please consider subscribing to the channel. It's free, it helps us grow, and it lets us keep sharing stories that matter. Your support means more than you know, and it keeps this community alive. Because at the end of the day, none of us should feel like someone else's ATM. We deserve better than that. Next move would cross a line none of us could ever come back from.